Good afternoon, Sangha. A few announcements before we get started today with Jiju, who's our Dharma speaker. Just a regular reminder about our Thursday novenas. Good afternoon, Sangha. A few announcements before we get started today with Jiju, who's our Dharma speaker. Just a regular reminder about our Thursday novenas. Sorry about that. Our novenas ceremony is tonight between 5:45 and 6 p.m. and we stream that directly to YouTube. So you can join us for any or a portion of that. And if you have prayers for yourself or anyone that you care about, you can send them to prayer@heartwoodrefuge.org. And the prayers will be read silently, not shared publicly, so they're confidential in that way. I just want to again thank you so much for all the ways you help to enrich the Heartwood community through your service and donations. If you're interested in providing volunteer or dana in any way, you can go to our giving page on the Heartwood webpage. Financial contributions help support maintenance here, matching dollar donations to help retire our mortgage, our Amazon wish list, nuns fund and social projects. We do have our Friday fun night this Friday, which is the last Friday of this month. And again, it's the Untalent Show. It's Friday the 26th. It starts at 6 p.m. And if you're interested, just go to our webpage on the retreat page and register for the Zoom link. And it's free to join. You can provide, you can share with us your talents or something that you'd like to develop and that you just want to share. It's no pressure. Just another reminder about the 20th Outstanding Women in Buddhism Awards ceremony. That's March 8th at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific to celebrate International Women's Day 2021. Heartwood will be hosting that ceremony, so it's very special. There will be outstanding women in Buddhism from USA, Taiwan, Thailand, and more will be represented and recognized. Again, that's also free, but you need to register on the Heartwood website for the Zoom link. And it's under the Retreats tab. And lastly, just please continue to like, follow, and share Heartwood on social media. Thank you so much. And here is our speaker today, Gigi.
Hi, it's nice to see everybody, and I know that you're happy to see us, this handsome group here. I'm not quite sure why I was invited to do the Dharma Contemplation today, but here I am. And talking about this, looking around the room and looking at what a handsome group we are, it reminded me of, does everybody know what MOOCs are? The massively online classrooms. So this started in colleges some years ago, and they were trying to figure out cost-effective ways to reach more people. And they started having these massively, like thousands of people. And they couldn't figure out quite how to do it at first, so they had so typically what they would do would be to have a professor give a regular lecture to a room full of people, and then they would tape that and make that part of the online classroom. And in the early days of this, they had a professor in one of these big stadium-style classrooms, and he started giving this lecture, and he gets about 5 lines into it, and he stops, and he says, you're a spectacularly good-looking group of people. I don't understand this. Because typical college students just are not that necessarily great looking, right? And they all burst out laughing and said, yeah, we're actors. So the university had paid a bunch of actors to fill up the classroom to listen to the lecture. Now, that's different from us because we're just handsome. We're not actors. So So the assignment from last week was, for this week, for today, was about decision-making. And I just want to review a few things that Tanyawati had said about decision-making, and some things that I was thinking about to talk to you about today. About decision-making. I always blame my lousy decision-making on being a Libra, but that's, what did you say? She said we develop rationales and justifications for our decisions? Right. So just to start by saying, what is decision-making? One definition said decision-making is the cognitive process of choosing a course of action or a belief, and can be made either rationally or irrationally based on information, values, tacit knowledge, beliefs, and personal preferences. It's a form of problem solving and prioritizing. That same article talked about ways our decision-making can be impaired. And sometimes that we are paralyzed by being overwhelmed by information or by overanalyzing. That's commonly known as analysis paralysis. Hmm?
So that the speakers can hear you more clear.
They're not hearing me clearly?
They can, but it's the best that we can.
So our decision-making can be impaired by a variety of problems. Sometimes we're paralyzed by being overwhelmed by information or overanalyzing, which is known colloquially as analysis paralysis. Sometimes we just keep finding new information or asking new questions and thus putting off making a final decision, which is referred to as decision precision paralysis. And sometimes we're just overcome with uncertainty. And that's known as risk uncertainty paralysis. Of course, we often just do the opposite, right? Instead of being paralyzed, we make careless decisions with little forethought. Another form of decision making. I think during the pandemic, a lot of us have also been affected by decision fatigue, decision avoidance, which can arise from stress or anxiety around making decisions, and by information overload. I was thinking about consumer decisions, and some years ago I decided I was going to buy a rice maker because I got tired of making rice on the stovetop and it would boil over and then I'd have a big mess to clean up on top of the stove. And I spent hours, literally hours, researching every rice maker on the market, seeing every review on Amazon or Wirecutter or wherever it was that I was looking at, and there was just so much to look at, So finally, I just bit the bullet, and I bought I think it was a Cuisinart rice maker. And the first time I made rice in it, it overflowed and made a mess all over the counter. So. But anyway, with all these problems with making decisions, and that might be exacerbated by being a Libra, as I said, the good news is that we can be better decision makers by investigating our minds. And this, fits in with the whole larger project for the year of purifying and training our minds. It's sort of the first step on that is really investigating our minds and how things work. So I just want to review some of the things that Panyawati said last week. She was, the decisions have to be made. So we form opinions about what we should do, what the decision should be. And we look to see what we should do, what we should decide. And whatever decision we make usually is something that leads us to being more comfortable. Like, for example, not having to clean up your stovetop every time your rice boils over. But instead of just saying, I'm making this decision to be more comfortable, we develop a rationale to justify the decision on some other basis so that we don't have to just say, oh yeah, it's all about me being comfortable. So we were asked to reflect on 2 decisions we've made or are making and we're to stop in our tracks to look at the rationale and whether the decision was better for something outside ourselves as opposed to being a justification for making ourselves more comfortable. Her suggestion was that by doing that, we can reduce the reliance on what is outside of us. We take more responsibility for our own lives. We can stop always trying to justify or explain away our decisions. When we look at external things, we realize that everything arises from causes and conditions, everything has a season, everything arises and then falls away. And that actually, I used to tell my students, when I was teaching college, I got assigned to be an academic advisor to a bunch of freshmen who were all undeclared majors. And, I kept trying to tell them that being 18 years old and not knowing what you majored in college, or wanted to major in college was a good thing, and that they didn't have to decide for 2 more years, so they should just hang in there. And they weren't that interested in my take on that. But I said, this is, be an undeclared major for as long as you want. Take anything that looks interesting, and that will help you decide what you really want to major in. And the other thing I used to tell them was that, and I tell my friends this and myself this too, is that almost all decisions are not irrevocable, that you can change your mind after you've made a decision, even an important life decision. If your decision was to have a baby, you might not want to change your mind. But there are things like buying a house, quitting a job, whatever, big important life decisions that are not necessarily irrevocable. So that can take some of the pressure and anxiety out of the decision-making process. But like I said, this is all in aid of how we're learning to investigate our own minds. And this is how we make choices and decisions, how we hope to make better choices and decisions, how we can stay with things that are uncomfortable, that we really know why we made a decision, and are less inclined to put the need for it or the remedy for it on what someone else has done. So as I said, it's a way of learning to live with internal dissatisfaction, that we're the only ones who are bothered by our unhappiness, and the ones who cause unhappiness in us are not bothered at all. So I know everybody did the assignment this week, so I'm going to open the floor to talk. You can talk about your experiences with watching your decision making over the course of the week. If you want to raise your hand to talk, everybody knows how to raise their hand on the, okay. And we'll call on you, and then you can mute yourself again when you're done. And it looks like, Nancy, you wanted to start, or were you just demonstrating how to raise your hand?
There was a problem signing up, and it asked for a passcode. So a lot of people that are normally here can't get in.
So the way I got in by launching the Outlook scheduling tab. That Zoom link did not ask for passcode.
Yeah, we typically have this set up so it doesn't require a passcode, so I'm not sure why this happened. Do we know what the passcode is?
There was not one on the email.
If you look at the account at the top, it should tell you what the passcode is.
So that's why you don't have very many people on the Zoom today.
Oh, I thought it was just because people knew I was doing it.
If you send an email out to people,
See, there's a passcode there.
they find a way to jump on.
See, the passcode is, I can't really see it. The screen's too pale.
470149.
470149. Can we send that passcode out to people on the email registration list?
Kind of an urgent passcode.
Was the meeting ID right that was just on the screen? Oh, we didn't have it on the screen, did we? Sorry.
For the meeting ID, got to a thing that asks for a passcode.
Okay, they're coming.
Well, I'm happy to give that whole talk all over again.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I didn't check to see if I got an email this morning. Sometimes Zoom just kind of does this all on their own. Yeah, the email I get said one tap mobile. The meeting ID is 463-131-868. Is that the meeting ID that we're using?
Look at the shield up in the upper left corner of the yellow thing and see if that's the same meeting ID.
Well, it should have worked without a passcode. I don't understand quite. And that tells you there what the passcode is. I'll just give it a couple more minutes while people join the classroom, join the meeting room. Maybe while I'm waiting, I'll ask about, has anybody read Talking Fast or Thinking Fast and Slow? No? Daniel Kahneman's book?
We have not received another email with the code.
Yeah, me either. And since people aren't on here, reading it out loud won't do much good. Well, why don't we go ahead if people in the room are willing to talk about their experiences with watching their minds when making decisions this week. We can just start there, and hopefully people will join in as they get into the meeting room. Anybody have something to share? Alrighty then. Well,
Sure, I'll share.
well, Nancy was up first. I'm sorry, Josh. So Nancy, go ahead.
Well, when there's an echo, I don't know what's going on.
Fortunately, we don't have it on our end.
Okay, well, I'll try that. When did it just go away? Okay. When Panyawati asked us to think about something, either present or past, the thing that came most strongly to me was basically the abbreviated story of Brian and I. When we met and had our first date, it was a really strong communication, and he was living in Ohio and I was living here in North Carolina. But for I was working as a physical therapist, and during the course of the weekend, I learned that Brian had a medical condition that I just thought, I don't need to deal with this. But over the next 2 years, we didn't have another date, but we stayed in touch and long distance, and occasionally swapped emails and articles. And it was still this really wonderful way to communicate. And then my father became very ill and died. And Brian reached out with a message that I was like, that whole thing about losing my dad, my mother had died previously. And I just sort of went to the Dharma and looked at what I was clinging to, what I was avoiding, what I was thinking about, what other people were going to think if I pursued this long distance relationship, and lots of things. But I just sat and thought about my heart and how I was thinking about really grasping for things and thinking I knew what the future was like and going to be. And so I called him, and actually I sent him an email. I was really chicken. He was living in Colorado at Naropa by then. He'd left Ohio. And he called me right away when he saw my email, and we decided that I would fly out there for a visit. It's been about 2 years almost since we'd seen each other. And so at the end of that weekend, 4 or 5 days, we decided we would date and see where it went. But that decision came about because I sat and listened and stopped and turned out all kinds of other things, including the fact that I didn't talk to my 2 adult children about it. And honestly, my children didn't meet Brian until the day before our wedding. And that is huge for someone like me who wants to always make sure everybody's happy and everybody's on the same page. And so for me, I really followed what my heart was telling me was right, and wasn't grasping at anything. I was already perfectly happy single, and so was he. And that my children had some real, because it was such a departure from my normal behavior, my children had some real adverse reaction, not to him, but to me. And yet now they think, within a very short period of time, they think that he's the best present I've ever given them. And so I think that sitting and listening to truly the internal messages and higher power and heart really has been the foundation for following the Dharma for me. Thanks.
Like you also paid attention to Panyawadi's admonition about external circumstances, like your children not being so thrilled about this, and looked at your internal decision-making instead. And, you know, if you don't mind my saying so, I think you made a great decision. So. Josh.
Hi. Hey, everyone. That was a great story. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciated hearing that. I would say, and I'm sorry I've missed so many of these meetings. I've just been having a hard time getting to them, and I have to jump off again and go teach a class in a few minutes. But actually, this has been something I was really working with this week. And I think, and I wrote just a couple notes down, thinking of decisions as kinds of actions, and actually giving like a lot of space for them, for all of them, for any kind of response to any kind of situation or kind of complexity that seems like I have to take a decision on it to like move that complex forward. And then like letting the thing sit, letting me sit to process, to kind of like filter, like, you know, like emotions or other kind of cognitive reactions to that thing, and then really trying to soften around it. And also kind of like in that softening, like taking the initial perspective or the response I had to that stimulus, and then waiting a little bit in this way, like I said, in this waiting period. Sorry, I'm kind of mushing my words a little bit here. But then trying to incorporate other views on that thing, my own, but then other parties who may be involved in that decision. I mean, specifically, I won't be so specific, but I have a lot of students this term, and because of the circumstances of the way we meet, some of them are in person, some of it's hybrid. There's just a whole slew of ways we're meeting. Everybody's a special case. Everybody's sort of always a special case, but like now everybody's like really a special case. And so there's lots of kind of like smaller decisions to make. And so I've just been trying to incorporate like my initial response, weight on that thing, and then kind of like sew together the other ones that come from me, but then also like the viewpoints of others, and trying to kind of to bring that variety to the thing. Also trying to catch myself if I'm like projecting in imagination, you know, of the future, or like how I might like it to be, but at the same time, like giving into that just a little bit, so that like I'm trying to sort out like, well, what creates, or what seems to create the most harmony kind of in that situation as the outcome, you know, what makes the most sense kind of as far as that goes. Yeah, and there's been a couple that have come up just, you know, in the last couple days, and I've just sort of waited on them and sort of watched the kind of impermanent nature of my own responses to them, watched the shuffle through all that, and it's been quite useful, actually, I think. Yeah, all right, well, thanks very much, and I'm sorry I have to run in just a couple of minutes, but it's really nice to see everybody.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
But I know the assignment was to think about like pretty serious life decisions that you've made. One that you were willing to share, one that you weren't willing to share. But I spent most of my week looking at my more trivial decisions because, you know, every day I make multiple decisions about food, about what to eat, about what to buy to eat, what to get at the grocery store, about whether to get takeout, all that kind of stuff. And I just make terrible decisions like all the time, and you know, all week long. And so I think, like Josh said, I think the key there is to be patient and to actually be mindful. I mean, people talk about mindful eating all the time, and mindful eating, I think, extends to decisions about, you know, grocery shopping and all those kinds of things too. So, so thank you, Josh, and I think that will, maybe I'll actually try to put that into practice. Who knows?
So can you do real quick, I guess everyone got the email with the passcode, so.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
oh, and Regina.
Regina.
Hey, everybody. Oops. Now we have, maybe, yeah, right. So I had a couple situations this week where I thought of this assignment a lot. Not that I didn't think in other situations, but those particular. The first one was our homework, reading Path of Purification. And so I started reading the sections that we were supposed to read and maybe a little bit more. And it talked about kasinas. And I never heard of kasinas before. And I read on and I thought maybe they'll explain a little bit more what this is. And they did, you know, the setup and how far away. The experience I'd had before. And so I thought, this is probably something antiquated that nobody does anymore. And put it aside and wanted to get to something that I could identify with more. So later on, there was a list of meditation objects that sounded more familiar, and all of a sudden I was at home again. And I didn't even know that I had made that decision about kasinas. And then on Tuesday, when Venerable started talking about blue kasina, yellow kasina, I thought, whoops, I really disregarded that section. I didn't think it was a real thing. And so I went back and read a little bit more. I asked a good friend of mine who is a strong meditator, I said, have you heard of kasinas? And she said, no, is that a Tibetan thing? And so when I went home, I started Googling, you know, I started Googling kasinas. I started to see how they are used. My plan after this total oversight is to just make myself one and try it out, you know, and see for myself what it does to me or what it does for me, who knows. And so I thought of this assignment that, you know what, there I made a decision just because I hadn't heard of something to completely overlook something that could actually be very helpful. And that was quite a lesson. And the other situation, my neighbor, whenever tree branches fall down and they're close to the line, sort of a third over, she carries them into my yard. And I really had to make a decision, you know, not the first time. Like, am I going to carry them over to her yard and write an email? Am I going to talk to her? I was really angry about it, you know, how bold is that she would just carry branches in my yard? And she's like, when you see her, you would never ever think that she does something like that. And so eventually I came around to telling myself, you know what? If we are all one, and if there's one big consciousness, it really doesn't matter who carries those branches to her branch pile. So eventually I went ahead and took these branches and carried them to my branches pile. But you should have seen me, how much I grumbled inside, you know, and things like that. And afterwards, the good part about it was that, yes, I could still go off about this and tell you how outrageous I find this. But at the same time, deeper down, I have peace. And I don't think I would have that peace had I written an email and tried to put this woman straight. So a big learning experience for me today, this week. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you. Because it makes me think of something that I was looking at for preparing for today, where like one of the first questions to ask is there really a decision to be made, right? I mean, you made a decision without realizing you were making a decision about the casinos, right? And I was really quite taken with that. And the example that the fellow who wrote the article used was somebody who came to him with help trying to decide whether she should leave her job. And in talking to her about it, he realized that there was really no decision to be made. That the situation was such that she had to leave the job. There was no decision involved there. It was just, her health was suffering because of the job, all this other stuff. There was really no question about a decision having to be made. As opposed to, then he contrasted that with somebody else who came to him for help with a decision about whether to leave a job. And there really was a decision to be made. She had a new boss who wanted to give her more responsibilities, and she was trying to turn towards developing her inner life more, was feeling a little burned out at the job. So there really was a decision. Am I going to overcome my burnout and take on more responsibilities because I'm flattered, among other things, that he thinks I'm good and I'm up to this? Or do I really want to, decide to not take on more responsibilities and try to develop my inner life? So I mean, that's a really good starting point. Is there a decision being made here? Is there a decision to be made? And am I actually engaged in an active decision-making process? So thank you. And what did you decide? Are you going to do a casino? Good. Yeah, Angela.
Hi, I ended up doing it backwards. I had to make a big presentation, and it was overwhelming. So I trusted someone to tell me what they thought I might do, and we did that. And I was disappointed. So I woke up in the middle of the night disappointed, and then I listened to my internal conversation, and it wasn't part of it was, oh, you should have done it different, but it was also, what is it really that you want to do? And so I sent out some additional information. What it was a talk about a book that I wrote about Buddhism, and she wanted me to talk about recovery, about having been an addicted person and how I was able to take the steps, just like in Buddhism. You take a step. I took a step based on suffering and curiosity. And then I found faith as I took the steps, which is very much what this is about for me. It's not, this is going to work. It's like, let me see what happens. So it was a nice little talk, but it wasn't what I was feeling. And so I put out what I was feeling, and it felt really nice to listen to the desire of who I really am. And it wasn't like, oh, I messed up. Oh, I should have done it different. But what happened was I was overwhelmed, and I allowed someone to make a decision for me so I wouldn't have to make the decision. So I wouldn't have to bestir myself. And just watching the process taught me something about patterns, habit patterns, and taught me something about conceit and comparing. Taught me a lot of things, but only because I stopped and had a space for the decision and action. I made, and it doesn't sound like a space, but what normally would happen was a beating up, and I made it, there was an overwhelm. I'll turn to do something else because that's over and it's messed up and who cares? There's a kind of a fatalism attached to it, when in fact, it was just another step in this process. And the next step ended up being quite lovely. I was able to put something up with some pictures and contact some people, and they got back to me and they loved it. So anyway, it was just, as I said, it felt like I did it backwards. If I'd have done it right away, maybe I would have not had to go through all that. It would have been lovely the first time, but it didn't. And so as I went back, it became a process of learning about myself, learning about what's good. I don't know if it's too vague, but anyway, it ended up being quite a good process. And I'm very grateful. Grateful for the language, grateful for the direction, grateful for the opportunity. Yeah, so thank you. That makes sense.
Exercise too. Who else wants to talk about their experience this week? Working with decision making. Because if nobody else says anything, then I'm going to keep talking. You can take that as a threat if you want to.
I just say one thing?
Sure.
The thing that I posted, the wonderful thing was we did a day of mindfulness in New York, in the Chelsea area many years ago, and Thich Nhat Hanh's monks and nuns came down from Deer Park, and we did walking meditation outside, and it happened to be the same day as the Big Apple barbecue. So they were barbecuing beasts, and there was food everywhere, and there's hundreds of thousands of people. And afterwards, a Hare Krishna parade came down the avenue. And after we got back in the building, one of the monks said, "How do you all keep your mindfulness? That wasn't the word he used, but how do you keep aware in such a crazy place?" And the answers were great. They're not my answers. They were from the group, that the crowd is made up of individual beings and you love each one. Today, we really prove that the fruits of our practice benefit all beings, and Sangha and community are very important. And it was lovely, and I got a chance to put that out there. I didn't get a chance to read it because I didn't have that, but it was and it really kind of showed what can happen in New York if you can settle in a city, any city, with a lot of noise. If you can just settle and make your process and your practice, what happens? So that's what happened.
Better than I did. When I was going to New York Insight, I would go to the Sunday day-long Days of Silence, and we do our walking meditation in Madison Square Park. And I would say, 1 time out of 4, I would go down there and there would be some big event in Madison Square Park, something for the US Open or, food or something like that. And it made me nuts. So you guys are obviously a lot better practitioners than I was at the time. New York is challenging place to practice mindfulness.
We had monastics.
What's that?
I said we also had monastics to guide us, which helped.
Well, Angela said something that also resonated with me. So I wasn't sure I was going to share this with you, but I will. So last summer I spent about 3 months up at Lake George in upstate New York in the Adirondacks. A very, very beautiful place, and I have a lot of family there. And while I was up there, I sort of resolved that I was going to move there and I was going to leave Hartwood and move up to Lake George and live there year round. And then I came back and I thought about it some more. This is part of being a Libra. And I was like, that's not a place to live year round. The house isn't suited for it. I don't mind winters. I lived in Vermont for 11 years. But I don't think that's going to, I don't think that's a good decision. So I changed my mind and I decided that I would stay at Hartwood. And then I changed my mind again and I decided that I would leave Hartwood but stay local so that I could continue to do things with Hartwood. So then it was, and I was, and then, so then of course, with this assignment, I had to think about, was that just a decision to be more comfortable? And I think that without making a lot of justifications or rationales about it, the decision was so I could be more comfortable. And, I think I'm okay with that. Sometimes I feel a little bit like a shitheel for abandoning people here, but I'm mostly over it. And then the decision was about, should I buy this particular apartment? And this is not the first apartment I've ever bought. And I typically just sort of look at a place and I say yes or no, and I buy it or I don't. And this time I was like, there's this problem with it, and there's that problem with it, and it's dark, and it's small, and it's close to the road, and and finally I was just like, you just have to pull the trigger here. So, so this is my Libra self fighting with the fact that you just have to make a decision sometimes. So I bought the apartment. And now I'm spending thousands of dollars to fix it up. So, oh well. But, coming to terms with the idea that I was making a decision that was just going to make me more comfortable was a little challenging, and but that was what it was. That's what the decision was, and I can live with that. So, I'm somebody who lived alone almost my entire life. When I was 5 years old, I moved up to live in the attic of our family house. The intimacy of family life was incredibly unappealing to me from a young age. And the intimacy of communal life at Heartwood was, and Panyawati talks all the time on it. Well, this is how we rub up against each other and it rubs our rough edges away. And it's like, yeah, okay. You all do that. Sorry. Sorry, I did reveal a little more than I intended to there.
I'd like to share some decisions.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to thank you, first of all, Ruth, for being so vulnerable and trusting and transparent there. And it gave me the courage to speak. And I had, on this visit to Heartwood, I came with great expectations of what my visit was going to be like. And Heartwood is no longer the same campus that it was when I was here last, before COVID set in, and before we started this amazing program of our year-long mind training with people on campus. And there's so much discipline, and I am so not used to discipline. And I am, I feel like I'm Garfield. I'm built for comfort, not speed, and certainly not discipline. And so when I got here and I realized, oh, this is not going to be the self-directed retreat I had intended. And my instant reaction was to just cut and run and just say, I love you guys, I'm going back to Missouri. But something in me said, if it's really that bad, you can do that a week from now. And you can run an experiment and see how much of this is your own thinking mind spinning out yet another story of doom and gloom and horror and uck. And it was really good. I got to sit with Clear Grace, who has always been one of my best mirrors. And she really put a different twist on it and invited me to do what you can. And you don't have to force yourself into a mold. That's your own thinking mind. And so with her help and with her guidance, I was able to say, you don't have to make yourself totally comfortable, but you don't have to make yourself totally uncomfortable either. And so I thought I would just stay for the first week, and then I thought it would be, go on home. But it wasn't. It was a decision that had I been looking out for what would just make me comfortable, I probably would have gone home. But it turned out what I did do was stay and work with my discomfort. And amazing things happened. Things that could never have happened for me had I left. The working with the rock tumbler, I like to look at it as the rock tumbler of life, that bumping up and rubbing our edges off. And I have had layer after layer of discomfort and something appear to me. And then if I'm willing to breathe into it and release, and breathe in and get heart-centered. And not even try and work with my meta phrases, but rather just breathe in and out of the heart and try to replace the unpleasant thoughts with a pleasant thought. I've discovered in this world of samsara and polarity that if you uproot something, but you don't put something in its place, that thing you uprooted is going to come right tumbling back in. And so I worked with the replacement of my negative thoughts with something beautiful, something of gratitude, something of kindness. And I'm getting ready to leave next week. I have less than a week left here in Hartwood. And what I'm finding as I evaluate the choice to stay is a tremendous amount of gratitude for being willing to see it through and come to the fruition of it. And now I discovered that retreat that I really thought I was going on, one of playing my violin and my fiddle a lot more, one of working with my songwriting more, one of working with my painting more. If I had done that retreat when I first got here, I would have piddled away the time. There just were too many layers of something that had to come off before I was fit to do the retreat that I wanted to do. And then that dear husband of mine said, you know what? Why don't we just get you a cabin in a national park and send you off for 6 weeks to do the retreat you wanted to do? So it's like some magical thing just manifested itself. And so I'm really, really grateful that I opted to not follow the inner Garfield in this moment. There's no guarantee that I won't continue to follow the inner Garfield, but in this moment I did not. And so I'm so grateful. That's not something that I was comfortable sharing. And I am so grateful to my dear sister Juju for being vulnerable and showing me that it's okay, that we can do this and we can share. That's the refuge of the Sangha. So thank you, my dear Sangha and my dear sister Juju.
Thank you, Maureen. Beautiful thing. So you're suggesting that maybe if I had stayed...
No, please do not hear anything. We each do what we need to do for us in that moment. No, I'm not suggesting a thing about
I know, I'm just teasing you.
You can tell Nancy she can.
Hi, Brian here. I'll share a story where greed and delusion trumped my better self. We were living in Colorado, and we knew we were going to be leaving to come back to Hendersonville within about 2 months. And my Outback failed. The engine almost seized up, burning oil continuously. And so we had 2 cars at that time, so we're down to 1 car. And okay, well, you know what? We can get by with 1 car. And I know all the statistics that says, don't ever buy a new car, buy a good used car. And I did the search for a good used car, and I said, no, I think I really want that new car. But I'll look here, and then we'll buy it in Hendersonville, because that would be the best and logical thing to do. And so I did a lot of research with Consumer Reports and decided which would be the next car I really wanted to have. And just out one day, we said, let's go look at the car. We'll just look. We won't do anything. We'll just look. And we go to the dealership and we look at the car and we go for a test drive. And I'm really liking this car. And at the same time, the back of my mind says, okay, Brian, you can get that when you go to Hendersonville. And I'm saying, you know what? We'll go to dinner. We'll think about this and we'll come back later. And we didn't go to dinner. And we stayed there. And I eventually bought that car, which not the brightest financial decision to make, but this one thing really wanted to have that car. So not only did I buy the car, we had to also spend $1,500 to ship it back to Hendersonville, where I had established relationships with a new dealer who didn't sell me the car. And all because there was that clinging thing that wanted that car at that time, even though it was 2 months. In 2 months, I could have gotten it here with a new dealer relationship and not spend $1,500 to ship it. So that's, and 2/3 of my mind knew that was not the right thing to do. But the delusion was enough that I let that other third run with it. And we ended up buying that car. I still drive the car. But it was, yeah. The next time I buy a car, I'm hoping I will discipline myself and discipline's the wrong word. I'm hopeful I will let the delusion fall away and I'll buy a good used car next time. But anyway, that's a case where I reflect on that and I'm saying, you know what? I wonder if I'd been meditating more at that time, could I have withstood that? I wonder if I had the Sangha we have now, could I have withstood that? And I'm so blessed to be part of this Sangha because it helps me remain more mindful. So I make less of those delusional decisions. I still make them, but I do make less of them now than I used to, I think. So thank you for the Sangha.
I want it. Yeah, I know that one. But I want it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's been a theme in my life, so I appreciate it. I wanted to talk about the casino. I made it. I'm meditating on it. And the first thing that came up was the imperfections, because it's not solid blue. And because I have other spiritual practices that I do, I said, oh, this is beautiful, because I know that we have unity consciousness, which I do some other meditations that brings me into that. And the places where it was a little white and then darker blue and a little white, little imperfections, I said, oh, this is really how the planet is. This is how our consciousness is. This reflects who I am. I am in this. And then the second thought that arose was immediately, oh, this looks like the blue planet, our Earth. And so that was I had a very positive, loving response. And then what I'm noticing as I'm doing this meditation is when I leave the casino, it's very obvious, because I don't meditate with my eyes open on an object. I haven't done that. So it's very obvious when I drop my meditation, and then I go back to it and then drop it because a thought arises, or my eyesight catches something behind the object. So thank you for letting me share that. It's a work in progress.
See you. Can you identify yourself?
I apologize. What did you say?
Can you identify yourself? We can't see you.
Oh, I apologize. It's Mary Elizabeth.
Hi, Mary Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. I had a telephone connection, and it's really yucky.
We heard you just fine, so I hope everybody did. Thank you. Sounds like, I think, did Panuati also talk about Blue Casino last week? And what did you choose a color casino, Regina? Did you choose blue also?
I'm not there yet. I'm really wondering about what color to choose, and I feel like I have not enough information. So any help would actually be appreciated. I also would love if anybody could send me a picture of one, like if you guys have one, send me a picture. I would really appreciate it. I was thinking of writing to Venerable and asking whether she would send me a picture of hers, just to know what this looks like, you know? Any help is appreciated.
Does the Vishuddhamagga talk about what colors go with what temperaments? Yeah. So that might help you decide. I think that whole thing is kind of interesting because I was always told that your teacher tells you what your meditation object should be. I mean, there's, like you said, there is guidance in the Vishuddhamagga.
There is, but depending on which angle I look at myself, you know, I feel like there could be different solutions. And then I'm thinking, well, that's probably a sign that I need blue. But I'm guessing.
That's one place where the Vishuddhamagga is not that helpful because they say everybody has all the temperaments, right? So, I was actually talking to Panyawati about that the other day. She used to be reluctant to talk about the temperaments or the personality characteristics as they're outlined in the path of purification because people tend to glom onto one and they say, yes, that's what I am, so they turn it into an exercise in being that person. And I say, yeah, that was a problem for me because I'm sure she's heard me say this more than once, like, yeah, I'm a hater, And then after the sitting the 4 nights of the watch, I really realized that I'm actually just not a hater. And now I'm like, well, now what am I, if I'm not a hater anymore? So there can be a downside to thinking about the personality characteristics too much. How are we doing for time? Oh, it's after 1. Does anybody else have something to share, or shall we talk a little more about investigating the mind?
Can I just say one thing?
Joshua's going to contribute.
I just wanted to say as an aside that as an academic, and it sounds like you're an academic as well, a lot of times I've always been taught that you need to use your brain and come up with the most logical conclusion, and that will be the right conclusion, and that ends up in my meditation life whenever I consider decision making to be a hindrance, because sometimes the best decision and the decision that is right for me and comes from within is completely illogical. The other thing I thought of when we were speaking was, just because we make a decision that brings about comfort doesn't necessarily obviously mean that it was the wrong decision. There's a little bit of a logical conundrum there, right? So it's completely possible that the right decision happened to have also been one that brought us comfort.
That's a very good point. Thank you. but the idea that as thinking academic. Pedagogically oriented, pedantic people, that we can think our way to every conclusion is, to me, one of the greatest delusions that thinking people suffer from. One of the most popular delusions of mind. Anybody else? Okay. Panyawati asked me to do this, but she didn't tell me to give you an assignment for next week. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, let's keep working on this same thing for another week. But I was also going to suggest that we maybe take on one or another of the sense gates and looking at how we react to, except don't look at mind consciousness. But to look at, eye consciousness or ear consciousness or something like that, and see how your mind reacts to. I don't think I would do it with all the senses, but maybe just pick one to work on for the week. And the reason I thought of that is because of a story I read about somebody sitting in a meditation hall listening to the teacher talking, and all of a sudden realizing his mind was so agitated, and he's like, well, why is my mind so agitated? And he realized it was because there were, I don't know, children or a group of people outside who were also talking, and he was really annoyed by the fact that there were different voices going on when he was trying to listen to the teacher. And this really struck home with me because I have a big problem with multiple people talking at the same time. So I think that if that is an experience that I have during this week, and I can really look at how my mind is reacting to that, that would be a beneficial thing. So I don't know if it's really going to be beneficial or not, but it might be worth trying. I just wanted to talk for a little minute about why we're investigating the mind. And I don't say, I try not to say my mind. And I like to think of our mind. Joshua pointed out that I am an academic, and I became very interested in epistemology when I was teaching college. And then in later years, I became very interested in social epistemology. And I think that's a very Buddhist approach to things, that we don't have actually individual minds, that we have a social mind. But anyway, in order to do these exercises, we have to look at what we think of as our minds anyway. So in order to train and purify our minds, we first need a clear understanding, really, of how our minds work. So what we're really doing here is spending some time looking at our habits of mind to train and purify down the line. And we know from the Buddhist teachings on dependent origination that we're starting from ignorance. And we're starting from ignorance about how our minds work. So what we're really doing here is looking at how our minds work, looking at our misperceptions, looking at our delusions about rational decision-making, for example, looking at how and what our habits of mind are and how all these things can lead to suffering. So then the question is, how do we undertake to investigate our minds? I mean, just stopping and looking, like Panyawati used the expression, stopping in our tracks, just stopping and looking is certainly helpful. But there are also, we all know that one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness is mindfulness of mind. So maybe integrate that into, or make that the focus of your meditation this week. And while we're looking at that, we look at how greed or the desire for comfort or hatred or anger or our delusions or our habits or our cognitive biases arrive, and just observe. Now, Panyawati has an issue with mindfulness meditation because you're supposed to just observe without judgment and then let it go, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about observing and making a note of it. Not just letting it go, but making a note of it and remembering what it is you're seeing. And the reason I mentioned the Daniel Kahneman book earlier on is that a lot of our delusions and misunderstandings include a wide variety of cognitive biases. So if you want a non-meditative way to explore your mind, work through some of the experiments that Kahneman described in Thinking Fast and Slow. It is, to me, it's one of the most interesting books I've ever read. When it got really, really deep into the weeds of neurocognition and stuff like that, I think I abandoned it. But I read about 2/3 of it, and it was really, really interesting. And the biases tend to arise in fast thinking. So going all the way back to what Josh said back towards the beginning about being patient, taking time and looking at things, I think that Kahneman would say that your mind works better when you don't let your biases come into play. bias is a word that it can be off-putting. So I'll just give you an example of a cognitive bias, which is confirmation bias, right? So I do online jigsaw puzzles. I know I'm supposed to be meditating all the time, but sometimes I do other things. And and I do the edges first, like I do with a regular jigsaw puzzle. And there'll be like one gap, and or a gap goes, and then it'll be like, well, this piece goes there, and this piece goes there, and then I'm wrong. And then I say to myself, I am always wrong. I am always wrong. I always get that wrong. But that's just confirmation bias. If I really look at it, about half the time I get it right? Because there's only two choices, and you're going to get it right about half the time. So that's what I mean by a bias. So we have all kinds of biases like that. And they're nothing to be ashamed of. It's part of being a person in the world. So anyway, I can't recommend that book too highly. And I think just like if you read Moby Dick and you don't read the chapters about whales and you just read the story, which is the way I read Moby Dick, I think you can also read Thinking Fast and Slow without getting deep into the weeds of neurocognition. So, any closing words from anybody? Questions, comments? Thank you so much for your patience with me today. I appreciate it. Thank you for being persistent and getting online with us. We'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth.